any tax-paying, Netflix-watching, dog-loving, heartbreaking citizen of the world with a fair intelligence and a strong faith in common sense will tell you this. No matter what kind of a tedious philosophical conversation you guys want to have, the big picture of this story is fairly simple. We are effortlessly in touch with the world through our 5 senses. If you want to know whether something is true or not, we just go and take a look. So whenever an annoying philosopher asks, "How could I know there was a chair out there?" we can kick the shit out of them and bring them to the chair. Look, you imbecile. Observation is an end to all these speculations. It is the self-evident, simply given foundation of our knowledge of the world. No. No? Really? I know. It's hard to think otherwise, but this commonsensical picture is wrong, fellows. And it is both fun and disturbing that it is wrong. In order to see why, let's first ask our ages-long philosophical question. Why are we here? As discussed in the earlier videos, our setup is consisted of our worldview and value standard, shaping our lives top to bottom. We try to make things easy for ourselves by appealing to the anti-mediation setup, a setup complete in itself, concrete without our intervention, free and independent from any conceptual contamination. The here and now became our worldview, and living in the moment our value standard. Yet as it turned out, this setup is empty inside. In order to make sense of it, we have to introduce a grand context, like hedonism or a religious framework. But if our activity in introducing is needed to make sense of the setup, the initial cause is lost. The setup becomes mediated through our activity, despite its original claim of immediacy. We should freak out though, because if we are incessantly involved in shaping our setup, it becomes impossible to be in touch with the world as directly as we want. To fix this issue and avoid the problems with the anti-mediation setup, we need to put things in a different order. Sure, our activity, conceptual or otherwise, is necessary for shaping our setup, but such contribution is grounded on our passive reception of a self-evident given from the world itself. In other words, we passively receive the world through observing it and then become active to construct our setup. There must be a temporal order here. First, we passively receive something from the world. Let's call that the given. The given is pure, meaning it doesn't have our mark on it. It is just simply received from the world through our 5 senses. The given is also a self-evident fact, meaning that it contains information about the world without us being involved in shaping that information. Then, based on this self-evident given, we become active and shape our setup and start knowing things. The given is our justified foundation for knowledge, our safe ground to see whether we are getting things right or not. Let's call this approach the empirical setup. According to this setup, science works just like that. Through pure observations, without the intervention of our theories, concepts, social norms, or anything alike. We gather data. Then we come up with theories based on those pure observations. Then go back and passively observe again to check the accuracy of our theories, and modify our theories accordingly. The given is the standard. It has the final say over what is true and what is not. We have a clear path to the truth. Happy campers, right? Well, not really. But this sounds so right. You would be especially hesitant to doubt this picture if you have a staunch reductionist brother-in-law or a common-sense no-bullshit old uncle around yourself. What is all the fuss about, they're going to say. Of course you just simply see the tree over there. Of course that's how science works, you idiots. Keep up with me for a few minutes, and with the help of the drunkest philosopher of American history, we will see who is the real idiot here. Imagine this scenario. It is 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and you're standing outside your house, looking at the grass. Some parts of it look black due to the shade of a tree. You're observing this shady section effortlessly and clearly. You don't need to think or verbally use concepts to know what is happening over there. Okay. Now, remember that based on the demands of the empiricist setup, this observation must be first a preconceptual awareness of something sensed. Second, it must be an immediate fact, true in itself, without requiring concepts. And a third, like any other observation, must function as the justified ground for our knowledge of the world. Let's look into the different layers of what is happening here. There is definitely an element of sensing, receiving something directly from the world. Unless you want to ask, oh, how do you know you're sensing anything? Maybe that's all in your head. How it happened? Maybe we're just a brain in a vat. Maybe there is a demon deceiving us. Ooh. Kant has a lengthy answer to that in his first critique, but we won't get into it here. Let's just agree for now that there is something that is being sensed. Fair enough. But the trouble only begins here. There is something sensed, but that's not enough to call it a self-evident fact or a justified ground for knowledge. Why? Imagine you have a kid around that is looking at the exact same spot. If you were to say there is a non-conceptual passive reception of the world, indifferent to whom is watching, then you have to agree with me that you and the kid share the same sensations at a level. But imagine the kid doesn't know anything about shades, lights, and darkness. Therefore, receiving the same sensations, you would say the shade of the tree makes the grass look black. But he says the grass is black, meaning that even if you look at that part of the grass under the sun, it is still black. Same visual field, two different reports of the observation. The kid's report is wrong, therefore unreliable, therefore cannot be a justified ground for knowledge. Then we have your report, which is reliable and accurate, seems to be a good candidate for grounding our knowledge upon. But why is it accurate? Not because of the sensations you received, as you shared that with the kid, but because you know something that the kid doesn't know. The concepts such as shadow, light, knowing how light works, and the standard conditions to code colors. But if the accuracy of this observation is itself dependent on knowing all sorts of other things, then the observation cannot be the foundation for anything. It gets its justification from somewhere else, so it cannot be the first element in the chain of knowledge. See, this is where things get stuck. Being merely in the presence of some phenomenon, let's say a blackish-greenish field, on its own is neither a fact nor a justified foundation for knowledge. One has to specify the content of their observation to become a nominee for such a position. The kid's report of his observation was wrong and unreliable, therefore not a justified foundation for knowledge. Yours was accurate and reliable, but the reason it was is exactly the reason for the failure of the impersive setup. Because the accuracy of your observation was dependent on knowing a series of concepts, not because it was simply a self-evident fact. Due to this dependency condition, your accurate observation, as an exemplar for observations in general, could not be the foundation for knowledge. Despite the fact that at the sensation level, we passively receive some data from the world, in our attempt to make sense of what we are receiving, we have to incorporate concepts, turning sensations into observations. Even the kid's observation was filled with all sorts of concepts and conceptual relations. These conceptually charged observations, so to speak, have an essential role in shaping our knowledge of the world, but they cannot be the self-justified foundation of it. Nothing can. The idea of a pure empirical foundation is a myth. The impersis is screwed. The impersis setup has failed. With the failure of the impersis setup, a common conception of truth fails as well. Truth is not passively received through observations. There is no option of same-day delivery. The world doesn't simply deliver truths. The world doesn't give you a setup in a package. There is no way we can shut down our activity and receive some facts or a self-justified setup immediately. Rather, we are always in a mediated relationship with the world. This should make you think about an interesting fact. Even in our simplest interactions with the world, we are always conceptually involved. If our conceptual apparatus can find its way to our simplest observations, we have an enormous power on our side. The world gives us some raw matter, but we are the ones giving it a meaningful form. It is us, folks. We are in charge. As much as we wanted to eliminate ourselves and let the world give us some ready-made package of truth, we have found more and more of ourselves. As much as we attempted to eliminate our contribution, we have discovered its necessity, nay, its mastery. The failure of the impersive setup seems to be our declaration of independence. But it is not that easy, fellows. You shouldn't join the party of the social constructionists right away. Those lazy drunkards. It is true that we are conceptually present even in our simplest observations, but that doesn't relativize everything in the way a social constructionist wants. The failure of the impersive setup only shows us that truth does not work the way we usually think it does. To put it into fancy words, the impersive setup is wrong in the way it understands the relationship between the subject and the object, activity and passivity, concepts and impressions, etc. The world is still there and we need its contribution, but its contribution is not what the impersive wants it to be. Yet there is some truth in this independence thing. The rejection of the impersive setup means we are not simply absorbed in the world. Rather, we have a distance from it. We have the final say in framing the world, not just some empirical given. That's why you see all of these different, fundamentally opposing setups throughout history. From Jonestown to Rajneeshpuram, from quantum mechanics to Egyptian myths. If the world doesn't simply deliver truth, we seem to be in charge for what we take as truth. And we can change our understanding of truth drastically. So why shouldn't we simply accept social constructionism? Because we are busted by nature from inside. Although we have the potential for such independence, our desires drag us back into the realm of dependency. We are living beings. We are animals. We have desires. In a way, we are nothing but restless desiring. Food, sex, shelter, and sleep. As much as we feel independent from the outer world, with respect to the way we frame it, we feel entirely dependent on our inner world. As soon as we get hungry, extremely hungry, we have no choice other than framing the world into edible and non-edible objects. If we are in need of sex, we will look for it everywhere. Yet, as much as we need to satisfy these desires, we don't just simply take their lead like other animals. We resist. We feel the capacity for standing above our desires. But in what sense? By managing our desires based on the principles we come up with. Those principles constitute our setup, giving meaning and structure to our desires. Although we are dependent on our desires, we assert our independence through constructing worldviews and value standards. Take the example of ascetics, whose setup even goes as far as vilifying desires, or hedonists, valuing desires based on the pleasure principle. There is no ascetic squirrel, there is no hedonist bear. Constructing setups is our way of doing things, our peculiar desire. But we are back to the original question. Which of these setups should we pick? Right now, that question is irrelevant, because we don't have any meta-level standard for evaluating setups. The world doesn't give us a clear-cut standard indifferent to our conceptual contribution. It is us and our need for having a setup. As far as I pick the setup, that's for a game. But that's the beginning of a new problem, because you have the same concern. You seek the same sense of authority. You also want to pick a setup to affirm your sense of authority and satisfy your desires based on your principles. So do I. As of this point, we don't have any reason to be nice. Why should we? Get rid of the facade of altruism. No universal moral laws are in place at this point. If it is possible for you to be the master of the setups, to be the one who picks the game and its rules, why on earth should you give up that authority for my sake? A complete satisfaction of my sense of authority is tied to my ability to seize the absolute normative power, to become the king of norms, the absolute arbiter, one master to rule them all. It is in the next video that you will see why winning this power game and gaining absolute mastery is only losing the game altogether, losing with no satisfaction. Fellows, If you enjoyed this video, please give me this and do that. If you're interested in my channel, let your generous soul loose and help me out by following the link in the description. Thanks.